Greetings, I hope you're good and well. I'm doing a book review today for The Island of Dr. Moreau. This book follows the story of a man called Prendick. Prendick is shipwrecked at sea. He is then rescued by another ship where he meets a doctor and his sidekick called Montgomery. There's also a very erratic skipper and some strange animal cargo. Shortly after this, he finds himself stranded on an island with this strange doctor called Moreau and his sidekick Montgomery, alongside some animals, although the word animals might be the incorrect word. This book gets off to a good start. I found the intro very good. When he gets picked up and rescued by this ship, we meet this very strange skipper or captain. And he meets the doctor for the first time and the sidekick, and you see these animals on board. And I kind of lost myself in the scene. I felt like I was out at sea on this ship, meeting all these weird and wonderful characters. So it got off to a good start there. And when he first arrives on this island, I kind of got into it as well. It was very creepy. Dr. Moreau came across as very mysterious, and his sidekick, I could actually picture Montgomery very well, and I like that. It's hard to describe characters, but I had a very clear picture of Montgomery in my head, and it was quite scary and creepy at the beginning. Prendick was on this island. He was staying in this cabin, and he starts to hear noises in this laboratory nearby as Dr. Moreau is doing something in there. It's all very mysterious, and you hear these animal screeches coming out of the lab. And there's a good sense of despair and a sense of isolation where he's on this island. So the book got off to a good start. This book has all of the ingredients for me to like it. It's sci-fi horror, it's weird, it's creepy, it's about a lone man undergoing some kind of traumatic experience. I should like this book, but for some reason it just didn't quite do it for me. I didn't quite enjoy it. In case you don't know already, it's got talking animals in it. It's about hybrid creatures that are half animal, half human. Dr. Moreau is a vivisector, and he cuts open these animals and he tinkers with them. So you've got these hybrids walking around the island, which is supposed to be horrific, scary, but at times it felt like I was reading a fantasy novel with talking animals. It came across a bit like, not like The Never-Ending Story, like The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman springs to mind. I felt like I was reading a fantasy novel with talking animals rather than a horror novel. And that the prose is very stiff as well. It's a very old book, granted, but the prose is very stiff. H.G. Wells, I don't think he was known for beautiful poetic prose. I think he was known more for his ideas than anything. So the prose is very stiff and very wooden. This is a short book. It's only about 100 pages, but it actually felt longer than that. I didn't actually realise how old this book was while I was reading it. This book was published in 1896, which is a fucking long time ago. It's over 100 years ago. About 130 years, roughly. And that is a long time. So when this book was first published, I imagine it was pretty scary. We're talking like the end of the Victorian era here. So it must have been pretty scary to people during that time. And also during that time, Charles Darwin's ideas were still, they'd been around for a while, I think, but they were still kind of fresh in people's heads. And Darwin's ideas were still kicking up a bit of a fuss and a bit of a storm. So a book like this must have been quite controversial among certain circles. So it's got that going for it, or it did have. It also questions Homo sapiens' superiority in the animal kingdom. It asks the question, how different are we to animals, or how much loftier are we than certain animals, or are we just animals still? Dr. Moreau kind of mixes animals and humans together, so the implication here is human beings are just animals like all the others. And it also tackles ethics, the ethics of animal testing. This book actually has a lot to say. It talks about ethics, it talks about mankind's place in the animal kingdom, as I say. It questions the topic of whether we should, mess around with genes and mess around with animals. It was quite prescient, I suppose. For 1896, it was quite prescient, and it has a lot to say even today. Thank you for making it to the halfway point of this video. This is a quick message to let you know that I have a range of horror and sci-fi horror books available, and some of them are completely free. If you enjoy my videos, you might also enjoy my stories, so why not have a look? And if you'd like to receive fortnightly updates regarding the world of horror and weird literature, as well as book recommendations and prize giveaways, consider joining my mailing list. You'll even receive free horror audiobooks for doing so, written by me and narrated professionally. Finally, if you want to support my work, you can make a donation to my PayPal tip jar. All the links are below. Thank you. Now back to the video. Several films are based on this book, apparently. I haven't seen any of them, but I think it's been turned into a film about 2 or 3 times. I remember The Mighty Boosh, which was like a comedy series with Noel Fielding. I think that was the mid-2000s. I think there was an episode of The Mighty Boosh where it was kind of a bit of a play on the island of Dr. Moreau. But I haven't seen any of the films. I'm not sure what they're like. It just didn't quite do it for me. It wasn't scary, and I found myself questioning the plausibility of it all. There's a chapter in the book where Prendick sits down with the doctor, and the doctor kind of explains himself and explains his methods. And so it makes an attempt to explain the kind of science behind his experiments. And it kind of sheds some light on how the doctor does his business and goes about it. But it's very brief, and it kind of skims over it. And I doubt very much it's possible to make a kind of hybrid hyena / human, or a leopard man. I don't think it's possible. Maybe in the future, but not now, especially not in 1896 anyway. So it seemed a bit fantastical for me rather than horrific, so it lost points there. I gave this book 3 stars on Goodreads, which is not great. I tend to avoid old books, to be honest. As a reader, I like good prose. I like decent prose, and most decent prose is at least 1950s onwards. No, sorry, about 1970s onwards, actually. That's when prose started shifting towards a more modern style. About the 1970s, roughly. So I tend to avoid old books, and this is a very old book, and H.G. Wells, his prose was very stiff, very wooden. I wasn't really impressed by his writing style. So 3 stars from me. If you need good prose as a reader, I would avoid this book. If you're a hardcore horror fan and you want to read all of the classics in the horror genre, then I think this is probably essential reading for you. But if you're just looking for a scary book with decent prose, I'd give it a miss. So there you go. Thanks very much for watching. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another book review. Until then, try to have a good day on this vivisectioned, hybridized, implausible piece of rock we call Earth. Lots of love. Goodbye.